Allô, Nissan? Hey, grosse tempête, hein?
Hey, Karine, oui, je sais, les vilains bonhommes de neige sont de retour.
Mais avec le Nissan Rogue à traction intégrale, c'est pas stressant.
Exact, il est conçu et testé pour nos hivers. Oh, Karine, il y a un bonhomme dans le Rogue.
Ah, c'est correct. J'ai allumé les sièges chauffants.
Ah, bien joué, Karine. Maîtrisez toutes les conditions. Louez le Rogue S 2026 à partir de 0,4% jusqu'à 36 mois, incluant une réduction fidélité de 0,5% pour les clients Nissan admissibles. Jusqu'au 2 mars, sur approbation de crédit, les conditions s'appliquent. Détails chez Nissan.
All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Now, Canadian retailers like Aritzia, Canadian Tire, Dynamite are shifting production out of China, driven by escalating U.S.-China tensions, tariff threats, and forced labor concerns. While some brands have diversified their supply chains to reduce risk, experts warn that breaking away from China is not so easy. Let's go to Carlo Dade, Director of Trade and Trade Infrastructure with the Canada West Foundation. Carlo, welcome to the program.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
I have it on good authority that you just returned from China. Tell me about why you headed to China.
Sure. So this was a public engagement trip, research essentially on my end. Part of my job is understanding foreign trade partners for Western Canada to better form our engagement strategy, identify risk, identify opportunities. Sort of the accompaniment, the deeper work, the research work that goes behind what our trade commissioner and others do. So I was invited by the Chinese government to come over as part of a large international conference with experts from around the world. Joseph Stiglitz, the Nobel Peace Prize economist, was also there. Former president of Egypt, chancellor of Austria, and then a few folks that work on China issues like myself rounded out the roughly, I think, 100 people that went over.
So let me ask you about this that we're seeing, right? Whether it's, Lululemon's another one I didn't mention off the top, Canadian Tire. What do you think about companies saying there are risks of having all our eggs in one basket, that basket being China, and trying to diversify? Just what are we seeing?
Sure. So we're seeing companies, and again, there are a wide range of companies. There are companies that are increasing their presence in China. There are companies that are running out, and there are companies that are resizing their engagement. So the piece to which you're referring, I think it was CBC or CP, was focused on those companies that have decided that for them, the risk have increased. And it's both risk from China itself, so worries about crackdown, worries about economic policy in China, worried about reputational damage from being in China. And then it's also the United States, countries that are worried about the U.S. crackdown on companies that engage in China as part of the U.S.-China trade war. The Americans have started this under Trump. Biden really ramped it up. And so some countries are just saying, look, with the U.S. Bureau of Industrial Security, the U.S. government and others cracking down on companies that are doing business in China and may be using inputs made with forced labor from the Uyghur Autonomous Regions and the U.S. just in general.
Well,
cracking down on everyone in China, they're saying, maybe.
Yeah, and just so with all of that in mind, certainly seems to me like it's a great idea. I mean, I think my mind says, yeah, that's good. Companies should be doing this for all the reasons you outlined. Would that be your assessment at the end of the day as well?
It depends on the company and depends on the situation. So PowerCore, the Desmarais,
yes,
big Quebec company, they probably know more about China and the government and how to operate there than everyone in the embassy. So there are companies that are large enough, sophisticated enough, and have been there long enough to be able to manage the risk. There are other companies that, if you want to sell in the Chinese market, again, second largest economy on the planet, over 1 billion people, rising incomes, they've almost totally eliminated absolute poverty. It's a market. If you want to sell to the Chinese market, say the structure of your business, the nature of what you sell, well, then you're kind of going to have to be in China. And so those are at least two mitigating factors. And you also have to think about global sales. If you leave China, are you just simply going to run into China elsewhere. You leave China to go to Vietnam. Well, guess what? You're still dealing with China and Chinese inputs. Indonesia. Even if you go to Brazil and Latin America, China is the largest trade partner for pretty much every country with two or three exceptions in our hemisphere. So if you run away from China, guess what? You're just going to run into China somewhere else.
We're wrapping up here with Carlo Dade from the Canada West Foundation, talking about some Canadian retailers pulling back a bit from production in China. How much of this, Carlo, actually has to do with consumer preferences? I tire at times, buying products, buying merchandise, and seeing made in China. And while it doesn't impact every buying decision, it has impacted some of my decisions at times. What about that? What about consumer preferences and how they vote with dollars?
Oh, sure. My cat does not get cat food made in China. And if I come home with a can, he's throwing it at my head. But seriously, it can have a preference, but you just don't see Canadians voting with their wallets on this against China. They keep increasing inputs. Chinese consumers boycott products from Korea, boycott products from Japan when those countries are engaged in political disputes. Canadians, when we had hostages being held in China, we increased our purchases from China.
Wow. What a great example, huh? So the two Michaels didn't impact a thing about what we bought from China.
But you look at the Chinese consumers, and they're boycotting right and left when someone's giving China a hard time. So when the evidence moves in that direction, I'll take that point.
Carlo, listen, we're going to have to leave it there. Fascinating discussion. I thank you for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Carlo Dade, Director of Trade and Trade Infrastructure with the Canada West Foundation.